Hey everybody, Tracy Brown here. I'm so glad you've joined me for this episode of Momentum. Let's build a momentum for interrupting and ending race based hatred and violence. Yeah, so maybe you have been with us hanging out over at the What Is Mine to Do Facebook group where we ask ourselves and each other the question, what is mine to do? With the people I come into contact with, the places where I go in order to interrupt or end race based hatred and violence. There are a lot of places you can find group and collective action, and we sometimes encourage people to find those organizations or those events where they can join in with others in collective action. But much of the focus, I would say 80% of the focus in the What Is Mine to Do group is how each one of us as individuals can equip ourselves, can educate ourselves, and can make a difference one on one or in small groups or wherever we work or find ourselves spending time with other people. Now, there are people in the group who can reach thousands, if not millions, of people because of their job or because of their influence. But the majority of people in the group, it's like, how do you have that conversation? How do you stay true to your desire to end racism and you go to a family event where there are people who are saying horrible, hateful things. So that's the focus in the What Is Mine to Do group. And this momentum series is all about building momentum by each week thinking about or sharing a specific tool, a resource, something for you to think about, or something for you to practice that will help you be someone who is comfortable and are courageous enough to interrupt race based hatred. I paused there because really just earlier today, I was having a conversation with someone, and um, and we both reemphasized how important it is to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And even though I do this work and have done not only race related work, but in all aspects of inclusion and diversity, um, it's still uncomfortable often to interrupt, to actually ask the question, have the conversation, um, listen, listen, right, actively enough to understand where someone else is coming from. It's hard more often than not. And so that's why it's like you may not be more comfortable, but you can be courageous. So, what are we talking about tonight with momentum? The idea that if you hear yourself complaining about someone else and the way they respond to race based hatred and violence, if you hear yourself complaining or criticizing someone else because they're not doing it the way that you do it, or they are not understanding the importance that you feel in terms of making sure your languaging of things is not reflecting stereotypes in a negative way, I've got something for you. Now, I'm not talking about criticizing someone in terms of in a constructive way. I'm talking about, complaining about someone and what they did, or complaining about someone and how they told that joke, or complaining about someone who has said they're committed and they're not in your estimation, demonstrating that. You have to have a conversation with them. Well, you don't have to have a conversation with them. That's one of the options. I'm going to give you three things to think about, and these are for you. These are for you. When you catch yourself complaining, stop complaining and start creating. Start creating a different kind of relationship. Start creating an improved level of skill for yourself or the other person. Start creating a different way of engaging around the topic. So, three things you can do. Three things you can do. Let's see. Number one is educate, right? You can educate the other person, or sometimes you get to educate yourself, but you can educate the other person about how what they're doing might be considered offensive. You could educate the other person about a different way of getting to the goal that they have said they are trying to get to. You could educate the other person or the small group of people in your sorority or your church or whatever group, your a social group, maybe it's your bridge club. You can educate instead of complaining, because if people are doing or saying something that is offensive or that is reflecting a societal race based stereotype, they really may not know that that is inappropriate. And if you're going to work together to move our society or your school or your group to a different place, you may need to educate. And I will just add there, sometimes I have to stop and educate myself. I need to go and look up, what does that word mean? Or what are some alternative phrases that can be used? And then use those as I'm engaging with others. But number one option is to educate. Number two option is to engage. And this is a place that often feels really uncomfortable for people. I don't know that I want to engage with that person who just did something that I know is inappropriate or potentially offensive. But to engage with them in a way that is not just beating them over the head, but to engage with them to understand what they mean by it. Do they even understand what it means that they just said or did? To engage in a way that is open, that is, sometimes I ask the question, are you open to some feedback? Or I will ask this question, are you willing to spend 10 minutes with me because I really want to understand where you're coming from? And I let them talk first for 3, 4, maybe even 5 minutes. So I am listening to understand from their perspective. And sometimes when I do that, in engaging with them, I actually see that I made some assumptions that were incorrect. And a lot of the time, when they tell me where they're coming from, then I can actually do a little bit of informal coaching, because I'm able to say, oh, wow, I get it. So if that's the relationship you want to have with your son's teacher, who is a different race, a different ethnicity than you might want to ask a few questions, because culturally they may be coming from a different place and than you think they are. And so, engaging with people is number two. And if you find yourself complaining or criticizing someone else's approach or what they have done, and you're stuck in that cycle of criticizing and complaining, then I would also encourage you to consider option number three, which is exit. You actually can exit the meeting. You can exit the relationship if it's a relationship that is not critical or central to your very being. Like, okay, it's a little challenging to exit a relationship with a first cousin who in your family you have family gatherings 2 or 3 times a month, so you may be able to exit a single conversation, but you probably want to use educate and engage, especially engage, if you're going to see this person 2, 3 times a month, rather than just always exiting the conversation, because there is a relationship that's ongoing. The same is true a lot of the times with coworkers, because you're going to see them several days a week, if not every day of the week, if you are in the workplace. So, but you can exit a single conversation if it's going off the rails, if it actually is something that you feel yourself so emotionally charged by that you can't engage at that moment. Exit. Exit is a better option than uh, cursing someone out. It's a better option than being so emotionally charged that you're not able to really talk to the person. You're just slamming them, telling them they're wrong, calling them names. That's not going to be productive most of the time. So you've got three options at least, but these are the three I like to remember because one, they start with the same letter, so they're easy to remember. And in general, it's hard to remember more than three. If these three don't work, then yeah, what else can we do? That's a whole nother conversation. But most of us, most of the time, we just need to have top of mind a few things that we can think about immediately or that we can do to get us through a touchy situation. So, what are the three? We'll go backwards. Number three is you can exit the conversation, and sometimes you can exit the relationship. Number two is you want to engage with the person. I find this is the one that I use the most, even though it is often a little uncomfortable. And number two is to educate. When it's something that you really know about, to take an approach of educating the other person or the group, or taking the approach of educating yourself. These are three things for you to think about, three options that I hope will really work for you. And that is this week's momentum. Let's build momentum together. Join me over at the What Is Mine to Do group on Facebook.